Well, Vegas doesn't seem to have any, I don't know, debate about who the number one team in the Big Ten East is. Just according to Vegas, that
Sure.
is Ohio State with their over/under set at 10.5 or 11, depending where you look. 11-2 a year ago, and what felt like a bit of a disappointing season. 8-1 in conference, of course. That one loss being to Michigan.
Yeah.
F plus actually had them as the number two team in the country last year, number one on offense and number 31 on defense.
Mhm.
So if you watch Ohio State, that feels about right, I think. And then the projection this year, according to SP Plus. Now this is interesting. This is SP Plus's number one team going into this season, number one on offense, and they project them to jump to 13th on defense. Ryan Day obviously entering his fourth season, and it feels like that's kind of been the thing where they've always had slam dunk offenses under Ryan Day. And the question has just been the defense. And if they are able, big if they do end up having the number 13 defense, doesn't that mean like they're a legitimate national title contender?
Well, okay. I mean, they were a legitimate contender last year with not a very good defense at all, right?
Sure.
Like, I mean, in last year was a flawed year, and there was a lot of flawed teams.
Mhm.
I understand that everyone had their chinks in the armor, so to speak. But Ohio State's offense is going to be enough to make them a contender, no matter what their defense is. Now the Okay, and here's where it gets fairly dicey. So the numbers, what, 10 and a half? You say 11's what I saw. We can
11 is the number where like you have relatively even juice on both sides. Like at 10.5, it's heavily juiced to the over. So
Mhm.
11 is a more commonly accepted number. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just okay. So Jim Knowles, the new defensive coordinator, comes in from Oklahoma State, and I'm curious. Like, did he bring any defensive linemen with him? Like, okay, and I'm again, I get I kind of get some flack for being an Ohio State hater, and I'm not that. They have an incredible offense. I'm aware of that. These guys couldn't stop the run last year.
Mhm.
And there is an element out there, and I know you SP Plus or what, like they have all their ratings and rankings. You can say whatever you want. When you physically get beat and can't stop the run, it didn't matter. It didn't matter because you lost to the two most physical teams you played against. If you would have played Alabama or Georgia, you would have gotten beaten badly by them because you wouldn't have stopped their running a game either. So, like, was your offense, which was the best in college football, did it matter in those games? Because they're going to have, okay, Ohio State with just their offense is going to have a lot of success against the lesser teams in the Big Ten. We agree there. But that's not what they judge themselves by. Ryan
Right.
Day said that in media days. They judge themselves. Can you beat Michigan? Can you beat the Clemsons, the Oklahomas, Georgias of the world? You have to beat them. And like, dude, I don't know, man. Okay, first year, I'm still, yeah, I know. I have to make a decision here. The number's 10 and a half. They did not. They had, you said they went 11-2. That's including the Rose Bowl win over Utah. So they
Right.
won 10 regular season games.
Yep.
For betting purposes, we'll go with their 12-game regular season. And okay, 11's high. 11's very high. I would probably go 11 and go under. Take that 11 number and hit the under there. Like, I think they drop a regular season game. They've done this in the past. Even maybe a game like, you think back to the Purdue game or the Iowa game from a couple of years ago. They've lost games where they shouldn't have in the regular season. Notre Dame week one, by the way, like Notre Dame week one is fascinating, and we'll dive into the Notre Dame game in a bit, I'm sure, when you start. But like, there's so much unknown here, man. Like there's so much just turmoil and stuff. And I don't want to be a hater. I really don't. I think I'm going to take the under on 11.
Isn't it a little bit crazy how they have recruited defensive line pretty well?
Yes.
And they have Larry Johnson, a legendary defensive line coach,
Yep.
probably on the verge of retiring.
Mm-hmm.
But doesn't it feel like they've really underperformed on the defensive line the last several years? It just they got 5 stars on top of 5 stars. And you have a guy like Zach Harrison who it feels like he should be in the NFL right now. But he's not. He's still there, and a huge part of that is just he has not broken out yet and really played to his level of talent. Then you have guys, JT Tuimoloau. I don't know if I said that right.
That was good.
Jack Sawyer, the former 5-star defensive ends who are now sophomores. It feels like one of those, at least one of them, needs to really step up. And you need Zach Harrison to break out. They're okay. Like, they have a couple guys at defensive tackle that aren't terrible. But again, like, we're talking about Ohio State, and we're talking about a team that, like you said, they measured themselves against Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma. And it feels like, I don't know, I'm just a little shocked and puzzled how their defensive line has been so bad as a relative term. Like, it's been bad compared to the level of talent they've had and at least the reputation of their defensive line coach, if that's fair.
Sure. So, okay. They're soft, right? Like, can we
That
just
might
agree
be
that
it.
they're just soft? Like, when a team can, when Michigan, your biggest rival, you're playing them in a game that means literally everything. You can't accomplish what you want to accomplish unless you beat Michigan, and you know that. Nothing, it didn't surprise you. That was not a surprise. You knew you were going to get punched in the mouth, and you went up there and could not stop the run. Could not stop it. Like, Haskins had, I think he had 5 touchdowns. I went back and watched the Michigan Ohio State game, I think 3 or 4 times this past week, just kind of prepping for this. But like, it's concerning, man. Like we like to fixate on the offense because, like, this is, offense reigns, and that's all that matters anymore, except it doesn't. And it didn't last year. And this offense, which is going to be great, just like it was last year, isn't going to be able to overcome these things. And Jim Knowles, who's a great mind, I'm not debating that. I'm saying that you can't just magically become tough. Like, you can't just magically recruit tough guys and bring them all in. Like, I think it's more of it feels more like a culture thing. It feels like that's been brewing that way, trending that way for the last couple of years, where they have gotten a little bit soft, especially in the front 7. They're talented. No one's doubting that. I mean, every player they have is a freaking 5-star. I mean, you're aware of this, but like, there's something feels off about that, and which makes me skeptical. And label me a hater, that's fine. That's why I'm going to be a little hesitant there. I think Notre Dame week 1 is a great test. I think that's going to be a really good game because Notre Dame's going to try to come and push you around and run the ball and be physical at your place, just like Oregon was last year. And can you stop that? Like, I think we're going to learn a lot about them in that week 1 matchup. And yeah, like any, you didn't give me a number whether you wanted to go over or under on Ohio State this year. So let's try not to agree here too much, but you're going over. Let's just get it out of the way. You're going over on 10.5, aren't you?
Well, I want to talk a little bit more, just kind of about the rest of the team. Like, we do have to mention some of the other things that we haven't talked about. Obviously, we've been focusing on the defensive line a lot. Their linebackers were also a weakness. You mentioned the front 7. The linebackers are obviously part of that. Steele Chambers, the converted running back, was like their best linebacker last year, and probably will be again. And I think that they can't be worse at linebacker. Like, they can't get worse than they were a year ago. I still don't think it's going to be a strength. I just don't expect their linebackers to be awesome. I expect them to be serviceable. And then in the secondary, you have Denzel Burke and Cam Brown, and I think they're good corners. But also, like, we're used to Denzel Burke.
Ward.
Denzel Ward. I'm sorry. They have Denzel Burke. We're used to Denzel Ward. We're used to some other, like, really big time corners coming through this program. And it feels like instead of a bunch of first rounders, maybe they have a few third rounders. And maybe that's a little unfair. And obviously these guys could turn into first rounders, but it just feels like the level of talent, it's not quite what it feels like it should be, just based on the way they've recruited. Like, it feels like they've recruited a higher level than what maybe they actually have. And when you look at some of those, because a lot of, like, the recruiting rankings don't care what position those players come in at. And if you stack 3 5-star receivers on top of each other, that's the same as if you have a 5-star receiver, 5-star defensive lineman, and a 5-star corner, according to the rankings. In reality, you want some more of that balance. And it feels like the secondary, it doesn't feel quite as talent laden as we've kind of gotten used to with Ohio State. So the defense, I have some questions. Obviously, they did bring Tanner McAllister from Oklahoma State at nickel. But if you're no offense against Oklahoma State, but if you're counting on an Oklahoma State transfer to really carry the back end of your defense, isn't that a little bit questionable? Like, isn't that in and of itself like a little bit scary?
Yes, it's very scary. Like that's why there are some of us out there that are okay. Ohio State is probably the number 2 most picked team to win it all this year
Sure.
in college football. They are. I mean, they're right behind Alabama, but I would say they're ahead of Georgia. Like I think more people are picking Ohio State than Georgia.
Yeah.
And like Georgia has far less question marks. Like that's what I don't quite get here. How are we putting Ohio State up here when like there's a whole side of the ball that like wasn't good last year and still have like we're still not sure if they're going to be much better this year. And like we're with Georgia, Alabama, even Clemson to an extent. I guess you could argue their offense, but like we know what Georgia and Alabama are going to be. And so yeah, that's where it's the concern, I guess. I even think like Michigan's more predictable. And by the way, going back to the defensive line, like when was Ohio State really great? Like they had the Bosa brothers, Chase Young, like NFL studs, not just like they were really good in college, but like they had dudes on the defensive line, and they don't have that anymore. Michigan had Hutchinson and Ojabo last year, and that was a huge reason why the Ohio State offense struggled. They got pressure in big games, and I think that's what Ohio State's lacking right now. And so, yeah, for that reason and for other reasons, like I'm not going to pick a winner between Ohio State and Michigan right now. I don't care to. What I can do is I can go ahead and take the under at 11 because I feel confident I can at least push that because I think they're going to lose one game, whether it's at Penn State or Notre Dame or Michigan or Wisconsin. I think they drop one of those to a physical team that runs the ball, takes care of the ball, and plays good defense. I think they'll drop one of those.
That makes sense. So I said all this negative stuff about the defense, and then you kind of have to still acknowledge that the offense is stupid. Like, and they didn't have great offensive line last year, and still had the best offense in the country.
Yeah.
And I do think they addressed that with the hire of Justin Fry from UCLA. I think that's going to be a huge deal. So, I mean, how do you improve from the best offense in the country? I guess you just widen the gap, which I think probably will happen. Obviously, C.J. Stroud, quarterback, Trayvon Henderson might be the best running back in the country. Jackson Smith-Njigba, widely considered the best receiver in the country. Throw in Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, Julian Fleming.
People forget about Julian Fleming now.
Yeah.
That guy was the number 1 receiver in his class, and he is often forgotten about. And yeah, like possible pop candidate this year.
Julian. And we didn't even mention any of the freshman receivers that, who knows who will break out. Maybe Caleb Brown or somebody like that. But like the point is their offense is ridiculous. Their tackles, Paris Johnson Jr. and DeJuan Jones, both have like first round potential, but again, kind of like their offense, they kind of left you wanting a little bit more last year. And maybe it's just that toughness factor. Maybe that's what it comes down to. And it really probably doesn't matter that much, at least when it comes to the Big Ten, like if their offensive line really improves a lot or not. But when it comes to the playoff, that stuff is going to matter. When you play in Alabama, when you play at Georgia, those teams are going to have loaded front sevens this year.
Yeah.
You need Justin Fry's impact to kind of happen now. and the same with Jim Knowles. I do think by the end of the year that will probably be, I think Ohio State will be more scary in January than they are in September. And I say that very carefully as a Notre Dame fan who has to watch his team go to the shoe in September and play Ohio State. I would pick Ohio State to win that game, but I don't think it's a guarantee. Like I do think that Tyler Buckner might RPO them to death because I'm not sure that they're going to be able to stop the run game, especially if you have an option with him, Chris Tyree, who has all the speed you need in the world. Yeah, I'm not convinced that Notre Dame can stop Ohio State's offense. I'm also not convinced that Ohio State's defense can stop Notre Dame's offense. I do think it could get a bit shootout-y. And if it's a shootout, yeah, it leans Ohio State. But maybe it becomes like a 32-28 type of game. And that might be the type of game that Notre Dame could win. But anyway, looking at their schedule, I like for their sake, I do like that they get Notre Dame, they get Michigan, and they get Wisconsin all at home. their toughest road game is definitely Penn State. I'm really not worried about the Michigan State game, just because Michigan State's biggest weakness is definitely the secondary, and we saw what Ohio State's passing game did to Michigan State a year ago. It was ugly, and I expect more of the same. It's just a terrible matchup for Michigan State. So it's that one road game at Penn State, and then 3 tough home games.
Mm-hmm.
Also Iowa, but that's again another home game. I'm taking the 10.5 number and going over.
Yeah.
I don't love it. Again, they went 10-2 last year, and I think them improving on that depends on the 2 new hires working out at least to an extent. And I think they will. I think they're going to beat Michigan this year. They get that game at home. And I think by the end of the year, they'll probably be at their peak form for this season. So I'll go over 10.5.
Okay. No, I could feel that coming. I just, any nerd, and I'm not calling you a nerd, but like any person that gets into the analytics loves Ohio State. And I think they're missing, I think, a crucial part. And it's the fact that, like, that's great that they have a ton of weapons, but you're not going to convince me this offense is going to be a whole lot better after losing 2 first-round wide receivers. Like, this is the same offense they had last year. They had a little more experience, but you also lost like 2 studs at receiver. So, I mean, to go to some guys that may be talented, but a bit more unproven, like Emeka Buka, and like Julian Fleming he's been there, like, yeah, whatever. Like we have yet to see it. It's not proven. Smith and Jigba's a stud. There's no doubt. Henderson at running back, stud. Stroud will be excellent again this year. Like, I have no doubt about that. But can you run the ball on 3rd and 2 to put away a game? You didn't much last year. Can you stop the run on 3rd and 2 late in the game? You didn't much last year. So, like, that's where the questions are up front. I wonder about their makeup sometimes. So, and it's not as much a talent issue or a numbers issue as much as it is like a culture issue and a toughness. That's more what I care about. So yeah. Oh, hey, disagreement there. Look at that. We disagree on some stuff. Let's go.
By the way, everything you just said is why I would probably pick them to lose against an Alabama or a Georgia. It's hard for me to find specific losses on their schedule. Like, there's a few games that they could lose. I don't anticipate them losing multiple of those. So yeah, I lean to like 11-1, that type of thing.
Okay.
So